Hello and welcome to the PowerSwitch, gaming's call-in talk radio show. My name is Peter Spezia, and today is April 22nd, 2017. This is the 23rd episode of the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We use Discord as a means to add and drop callers to talk about video games and switch the power that is found in a typical gaming podcast. You can join our server to participate during recordings at rhymeswithasia.com/call. Hope you've had a good week. Mine has been filled with, what else? Persona 5. I think I said I was at like 42 hours, something like that last week. This week I am at 77 hours into the game. And you're just like, well, that sounds like a lot. I mean, most people, I guess, did 100 hours when they completed full playthroughs. I am on easy difficulty. Didn't really drop it to safe. I kind of wanted to keep the negotiation part of the game intact with all the different personas there. So where am I in the game? Try to keep things spoiler free. I'm on December 17th in the calendar, which is really close to the end of the game. I am at the, really just before the boss of the ship palace. So yeah, it's really late. It's not, the end by any means, but we're very close here to the end. And I think with a couple more prolonged playthroughs, I'll be have that game beaten, and that's pretty crazy to think. I have a lot of thoughts about it. I wish I could spend a whole show talking about it, but we might have to do that for a spoiler cast. And speaking of spoiler cast, I am still editing The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild spoiler cast. Hopefully that will be out this week. Still in the process of working through that. So hopefully we'll see that, and within a week or two, we can get the Persona 5 one scheduled. That would be great to talk about, because I know we're getting people now starting to beat the game, and there's a lot to talk about. Where does it stand up to other Persona games and the like? And it's got me thinking, as we get into our main topic for today's show, about the RPG franchises that shape us. And I kind of wanted to be a little more personal sort of topic here today. I mean, there have been some news stories, and we'll save that for the end of the show here, and just kind of what is happening there in the industry, because it was kind of a slow news week overall. So I kind of wanted to slow things down, kind of a chill, laid-back show today, kind of to talk about the different role-playing games that have kind of helped shape me personally as a player. And then if you wanted to call in and talk about yours or really anything else, that'd be great when we get to the callers here. I wanted to start with Persona, though. I've talked about my favorite games already on this show, and so some of these overlap because role-playing games are a genre that I really identify a lot with and really enjoy, and have kind of been part of the formulation of my experience as a game player. But Persona kind of hits all of the different check marks for me. It's why I love that series so much. You have really the story involved with the characters are a huge part of that game. You got some good dungeon crawling, turn-based action, a lot of elemental weaknesses and all that you see in a different sort of franchise that we'll talk about a little bit more soon here. But it really just kind of hits everything there. And when I talk about Persona 4 Golden as my favorite game of all time, and Persona 5 is going to compete for that spot. I mean, it's if not, it's going to be just one or the other at this point. It's really having a great time with it. But those games just kind of do so many things that really appeal to me, and so that's really kind of shaped my overall experience playing games. But I wouldn't be anywhere without the Pokemon series, and that's where it kind of hits on the fundamentals of turn-based role-playing games. When I was 10 years old and playing Pokemon Blue for the first time, and learning about weaknesses and resistances and this type of things. And when you think about role-playing games, I think it's an interesting sort of genre to kind of fit certain games into. The way I sort of see it, when you talk about what is an RPG, I would like to think levels are involved at some point. So when I see some people categorize The Legend of Zelda as an RPG, I wouldn't say that's the case. You're not really involving leveling up. Yeah, maybe certain items. You have the next sort of level, I guess, there, the next more powerful sword or the next more powerful tunic or things like that. But you're not really leveling up skills per se. I mean, yeah, maybe in something like Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, maybe that takes a little bit more RPG roots. But that would be, I think, more, kind of falls in on the, action adventure sort of game. That's also very, broad and hard to define overall. But I wouldn't consider Zelda as an RPG, but Pokemon to kind of really get me into games. That was the first game I owned, was Pokemon Blue. And so that really kind of taught me, I guess, the fundamentals. When people say it's, baby's first RPG, when you talk about going to Pokemon centers and healing for free, that's kind of a different sort of thing as compared to something like Final Fantasy. I remember talking to one of my old podcast co-hosts who played Final Fantasy for years, and then when he tried Pokemon for the first time, he was called it like the Obamacare of role-playing games, because you're just healing for free. You just go back and no consequences, just heal. Yeah, you have items that you can heal while you're in the field, but that sort of structure, I think it's a good role-playing game to learn off of, and it kind of shapes a lot of the experience overall, especially if you start that young. But I think that's an important franchise to me as well. Also, I would consider Mass Effect to be an important RPG. Now, this is kind of going into the Western RPG as opposed to the Japanese role-playing game. With Mass Effect, and you're kind of mixing in your third-person shooter action, the over-the-shoulder, using different powers, using guns. But with BioWare, it's also really about the characters. It's about the interaction there. It's about the overall story. People can say different things, what they like about Mass Effect 3 and its ending. But those games, it's all about the journey. Even with something like Mass Effect Andromeda, many different faults to that game, but overall, it's a fun journey with those characters. And that's really what it's all about. And so experiencing the Mass Effect games, that's really influential to me personally. Also, Kingdom Hearts as well. It's another JRPG. When I haven't experienced as many Final Fantasy games as I'd like, I wouldn't put it in like my top 5 most influential RPG franchises, but there are many great games to it. But it's kind of interesting to have Disney mixed with Final Fantasy with Kingdom Hearts, and kind of borrow a lot of the different elements of Final Fantasy with the skill names and items. And you get a hack and slash gameplay that's totally different. The live action sort of role playing game, as opposed to the very strict, regulated turn-based sort of structure there. With Kingdom Hearts, you're talking about a series that has a huge, crazy lore. I mean, if you put like a top 10 list of just most ridiculous canon chronologies and just the overall story structure, I mean, Kingdom Hearts has to be in the top 3. At least. I mean, Metal Gear's up there. Maybe you could argue Halo. There are a lot of games that would go on that list, but Kingdom Hearts really kind of goes all into that narrative, even to the point of obscure, just really deep, engrossing narratives that it's tough to explain at certain points. But when you really get into it, it's very engaging and repetitive but rewarding gameplay as well. That's kind of influential. But taking the Disney nostalgia from childhood as well and applying that to video games, I think that's also very effective. And then finally, Chrono Trigger. I only played Chrono Trigger about a year and a half ago or so, is when I played and finished it for the first time. So I don't have the nostalgia from my youth experience with it. But I think what is important with Chrono Trigger is it kind of shows how RPGs were developed at a time like the Super Nintendo. And certainly you had RPGs even before then. I mean, the original Final Fantasy on NES, even ones before then that are text-based, and you say something like Zork. But Chrono Trigger is important to me as far as, influential RPG games and franchises, because it shows the effectiveness of good game design when there isn't as much technology to really push it forward. It shows. I mean, what was the Dream Project back then, right? With the different creators, with Toriyama, with a guy from Dragon Quest, just all these great minds coming together to just really bring something great to existence. So I guess if I had to say, 5 RPG franchises that were really influential to me and shaped my gaming experience, I mean, Persona is right up there, Pokemon, Mass Effect, Kingdom Hearts, Chrono Trigger. Those are important ones for me, but I'm sure you have plenty of others. There are tons of others I didn't touch on. I mean, I don't really go into MMOs, but, there's World of Warcraft that's out there. I know a lot of people love the Tales games. The Elder Scrolls is another, a sort of Western RPG that's big there. And of course, lots of people have deep roots to Final Fantasy. So if we get callers, I'd love to hear some of those games and hear you talk about some of your memories associated with them, what's really, shaped your gaming experiences. And I just love to hear those kind of stories. But that's what I have to say. When we come back, we will get to the callers. What do you think? Love to hear your thoughts, but you can also bring up whatever gaming topic you'd like to discuss, whether that's games you're playing recently, your favorite games, or even something like the RPG franchises that have shaped you. And don't forget, you can also bring up what another caller had to say too. That's all when we come back, here on the Power Switch. Welcome back to the Power Switch. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say here. Let's get to the callers. Maybe a slower show today. It's been one of those weeks that, we're either, deep into games or just we're very busy. So anything, we'll take what we can get, and looking forward to hear what you all have to say. Joining us from Alberta in Canada, welcome to the Power Switch, Anneke. How are you?
I'm great. Great to be here.
Thank you for calling in. What is on your mind today?
Well, I've been playing this game called Night in the Woods lately on Steam.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a quick run over, it's an adventure indie game. I'm sort of hesitant to call it a mystery horror game because there's elements of mystery to it, but to the point where I'm at the game, which is a little over halfway, they're kind of lighthearted about it, so it's not quite horror, but I hear from people it gets a bit darker later. It's a pretty simple game. It's very narrative-based. There's basic walk, jump, talk, and other commands to interact with the environment. But it is very story-based, so you're just kind of playing along what the developers have written out and watching the story unfold.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, some people may not like that kind of linear sort of gameplay, but if you really want to be taken in by that kind of experience, I mean, I know I personally have no problem with kind of going along that path. You have that kind of interaction where you choose who you get to talk to. I mean, how much interaction do you have with side characters, or do you just power through and see what's there? I mean, we've heard Jeremy Baker, Game Buddy, talk about Night in the Woods on the show as well, and he seemed to be really enjoying it. I mean, I'm sure he's maybe done multiple playthroughs even. But overall, I mean, what's your thoughts so far? It's a game I still have yet to get to, and so I'm curious to hear more people talk about what they think about the game.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a little over halfway through the game, so I don't know the entire experience yet, but so far I'm really enjoying it, and on a very personal level, it's my game of the year. Although
awesome.
I haven't really played many other games this year. I've got a personal connection to it, so that really makes the whole game experience better. You play as May, an anthropomorphic cat, who's just dropped out of college and has moved back home with her parents because of that. And so I can really connect to that because that's sort of where I'm at in my life right now. I can't exactly call myself a college dropout because I did get an undergraduate degree, but I did quit my master's. So I still feel that sense of not necessarily failure, but just not accomplishing what I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And then like a month ago, I moved back in with my mother. So I feel like I'm in a very similar position to the protagonist of the story. On the surface, this game, it looks like this very cutesy animal game. The art style is very soft and kind of happy. It uses brighter colors. But like when you play the game and look deeper into some of the dialogue and your interaction with characters, it deals with a lot of issues of mental illness and depression and even class struggles. So I think a lot of people today, youth and young adults can definitely relate to some of the things that are brought up in this game. It is a linear story, like you were mentioning, but there are some choices you can make. So I know someone else who played the game, and basically you can go left or right on some screens, and I tend to go both ways and just try to get everything I can out of each day. But my friend didn't go left at all, but still managed to, play the game and finish it. And so I don't know if that like drastically changed his experience or if he just didn't get the story elements from the other side of town. There are like small minor characters, just the people who live in the town that you can talk to every day, and they have like quirky little things to say, but it doesn't really affect your story. I think the only things that do affect your story are you've got a group of 3 or 4 friends, and on given days you can choose to hang out with one of them. So if you choose to hang out with one, then you get their story and you miss out on the other people's story. So there's a little bit of choice to it, but the end game, I believe, is the same regardless of the choices you make.
It sounds really interesting in certain ways hearing when you're talking about it, and I'm making parallels in my mind to Persona 5, oddly enough. When you're talking about like a game that's really designed for today's youth, for today's millennial generation, and that we fall under, I think that's really important. Not only are you getting the people who have grown up with games being able to tell their story through development, but it's also important to touch on those the mental illness and things like that, like you discussed. That's really, really important to help games grow overall as a medium, and I'm really glad that people are finding connection with that. I think at the end of the year, you're going to see a lot of people mentioning Night in the Woods up there, if not at the top, near the top of their games of the year for 2017. And that's really awesome to see. But Persona 5 has a lot of parallels with, the struggles of today's youth and feeling oppressed by society and feel like they can't go anywhere. And then when you're talking about hanging out with your friends and you have those choices, like, yeah, just like that too. So very different games overall. I mean, a big engrossing JRPG versus a linear story. And I'm sure that as far as the experience of the story, that, if you just, power through it, you'll still get, what the developers want you to get out of it. But if you keep exploring, I'd imagine, you get, those little side stories, the little, hidden nuggets of the different NPCs. Both experiences for the game deliver, the same overall message. But, if you spend more time with it, and I think that's like most games, you're going to get more out of it overall.
Yeah. And Night in the Woods is a game that I can't see myself just powering through. I can only play it for little bursts at a time just because it is so emotionally intense for me. I know like in some other RPG games, they allow you to customize the character you play as so it can look like you, and you can make choices that kind of cater towards how you would do things, whether it's dialogue choices or, going one way or another in a game. And this game, however, even though you just play as May as she's written, you do get like some dialogue choices out of like 2, but they're very similar and they ultimately end in the same way. Me personally, I feel like this game was like written for me. I feel like I am May, the main character, and she is me. And maybe I'll regret that because I haven't finished the game and maybe she turns out terribly. But from the start, I felt emotionally connected to her just by her situation and the way she talks and the way she interacts with her family, her friends. And as I've played more of this game, that emotional connection has only intensified. And for me, personally, I know this is a very unique experience, but I feel like I'm watching myself and my own life play out on the computer screen, because it hits all of those things that are happening right now in my life, and it's very parallel. And as you play, you slowly learn May isn't like the best person. And so when you recognize some of those features in yourself, like I do, it can be eye-opening and a bit intense. And so I have to like stop playing or else I get like really sad about it. And so that's why I only play this game in short bursts and I can't power through. But I think it's really special to find a game that resonates with you like that, and where you feel like the character is you and you're playing out your life in a game, but someone else has written and developed that story.
Wow, that's remarkable. I'm really happy that you found that kind of experience, because I don't think that happens for too many people. But I think that really shows, the power of games as a whole. I mean, I don't think you can necessarily find a movie that, you're controlling the actions, but yet the story is delivering, those beats for you, and you have that sense of control and agency. That's really awesome. I'm really glad that you're having that kind of experience with it. I mean, albeit, it can be very overwhelming, as you mentioned, and it's the short burst sort of thing. And it's good that, the game's designed in a way that you feel like you want to keep going after those segments, and you're not forgetting elements of the story and things like that. Because when you put down a game, sometimes it can be hard to pick it back up. But I think that really shows to the quality of the game design and the storytelling. That's really awesome. I'm glad you're having that experience.
Yeah, and like there's a lot of the game that I do find is directly relevant in my life, like her situation with moving home and dropping out, and her issues with depression and her interactions with friends. But there's a lot of things in the game that I don't personally connect with that a lot of other people may connect with. I know that some of the characters have relationship issues and anger problems, and they deal with deaths in their family, and a lot of the characters do feel like they're trapped in this small town and wish they could go off to college or other jobs, but they're stuck there. And so I think that there are elements in this game that a lot of people can connect to. I think just because there's so many of those that are bang on parallel with my life, that's the reason why I feel so strongly with this game.
That's so awesome. And I think, we've, again, it's the second time we mentioned it on the show, and if that sounds like your kind of game for those that are listening, I mean, it sounds like a very special one. So go check it out. Go check out Night in the Woods. Certainly we'll be hearing more about it throughout the year. It sounds like the more people that play it, to consider it for that, game of the year, sort of, end of the year sort of discussion. That's, sounds like a powerful indie game.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it for people. And even if they don't relate to some of those issues, I still think it's a good story, and you can learn about someone going through those things if you are not going through those things yourself. And just on a kind of more shallow level, I guess, like the graphics are really nice and the music's good and the atmosphere is good. So it's a good game outside of the story as well. Terrific.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you so much for calling in. And it sounds like you're out and about. So I also am flattered that it also shows the power of, this kind of show. Like, don't have to be locked down at your computer. I mean, wherever you are, you can call into the show. So I really thank you for calling in, Anneke. Where can people find you on the internet, or anything you'd like to plug?
People really can't find me on the internet anymore. I used to be on all the social medias, and then I just got rid of them all. So you got to find me, I guess, on the PowerSwitch Discord server.
There you go. rhymeswithasia.com/call. Well, thank you so much. I mean, everyone go check out Night in the Woods. I think it sounds like a game that I have to put next on my to-play list here right after Persona 5. But really, thank you for sharing your experience. I hope you continue to enjoy the game, and thanks so much for calling in.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed being here, and I'm glad I could be the one to make this podcast international.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
And joining us from Texas, Jesse, welcome back to the PowerSwitch.
It's good to be back.
Absolutely. What is on your mind today? What would you like to talk about?
So after I beat Breath of the Wild, I didn't really have another new game to get to. So I'd heard Power Glove's cover of Kraid theme, because, the band Power Glove was making a comeback. And that got me in the mood to start playing Metroid again.
Oh, yes.
So I decided that while I would wait for a new game to come out, I decided that in the meantime I'd just go back through all the Metroids in canon order. So I started with Zero Mission, and now I'm on Prime.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, I've seen Zero Mission be played. We had Super Soul Harath, however you know him. When he visited house one time, it's like, all right, I'm just going to play this and burn through it really quickly. And then you have the special ending there, which is really neat to see. But yeah, so I've seen it played. Of course, I've played through the Metroid Prime trilogy. Those are amazing games. That's really cool, because what Metroid we're hoping for an announcement maybe at E3. It seems like it could be a good time to talk about something for Switch, but it's cool that you're going back in canon order.
I mean, I think it's just time. It's time for a new Metroid, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. What were your thoughts on Zero Mission? I mean, it's, for those that don't know, it's the original Metroid, but kind of done in a fusion style on Game Boy Advance with some extra added sort of perks there. What were your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, Metroid Zero Mission is the retelling of the original Metroid game using a very similar map with the freedom of Super Metroid and the speed of Metroid Fusion. I had forgotten just how tight this game feels. Like, I felt like I was doing parkour as I was playing it, even though I'm not even a speedrunner at all. And I would find myself just making I could get up there the slow way, or I could just jump off these walls and climb up there. And I miss that. I think it's time for a new Metroid game. I really do.
Would you prefer a kind of 2D style Metroid game like that?
Maybe, maybe not. I know a lot of people want a Prime, and I wouldn't complain about getting a new one, though my personal favorite Metroid games are the Japanese ones. I got really excited for Other M doing a third-person perspective, and I think everyone is disappointed with Other M in hindsight, but I still don't want them to give up on the idea of doing a third-person Metroid game, because I like the Prime games a lot, but my one problem with them is that they're very... When I think of Metroid, I think of the side-scrollers, and when I think of the side-scrollers, I think of games that are very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And Metroid Prime, again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm bagging on it, because it's an amazing game, but the one thing that makes me prefer the Japanese Metroid games is the fact that they're just faster. It doesn't feel as sluggish when I have to backtrack through those games.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. And then, for the Prime games, it feels more floaty because of the first person's perspective. You're not entirely sure precisely where your jumps are going to land. Whereas, in the 2D, like you see your arcs, you kind of know where that's going to end up. So I think that's a fair comparison. Very different styles. I mean, Metroid Other M, I know it's very divisive for a lot of people. I wasn't a fan of the story. There were certain things also like focus on, the green blood on the green grass. Like that could have been...
That was bullshit.
It was bullshit. Like that could have been...
That character, without giving you these spoilers, doesn't even have green blood.
Exactly.
If you watch play through Prime.
But I mean...
Nakamoto said that Other M's kind of like a different perspective. I tend to think of Other M as being something that is canon, but told in retrospect. So a few things are kind of just artistic license.
So that's an interesting way of looking at it. But... the gameplay, I really like the gameplay. I mean, aside from the whole changing the Wii remote position, I think that was just, a sign of the times and their solution for kind of doing that. If that were like at a push of a button and you were just going back and forth between those perspectives, I think that would have been really cool. I mean, that was a game I 100%ed. Like, I don't 100% too many games, but like I 100%ed that game, and I enjoyed the gameplay and enjoyed the secret hunting there. But the narrative... there's a lot left to be desired there.
So, have you played any other Japanese Metroid games besides Other M?
Super Metroid. I got through that.
Great game.
The great game. Yeah, I mean, that was another one where it was just last year or the year before, and really just appreciating that older Super Nintendo style of game that I did not grow up with, but appreciating those designs. I haven't done Fusion. I one time tried a little bit of the first Metroid, but it's notoriously hard. So I should play Zero Mission for sure. I'd say, it's the Prime games and then Super Metroid and Other M. Those are really the ones that I've played.
I would strongly recommend playing Zero Mission if you enjoyed the gameplay style of Other M, because I can tell that those games were made with the Game Boy Advance games in mind.
Mm-hmm. And I know people love Fusion. Like that's another highly respected one. Yeah.
Fusion's good. It's just very linear, and that's part of the same problem that Other M has. It's linear, but it's still really fun to play. It still feels very tight. You can speed through it. If I had to recommend one, I would just say get Zero Mission. I'm pretty sure it's on the Wii U eShop, right?
I think it recently did go up on that. Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed to see what happens with Nintendo Switch, because I think that'd be an awesome game to play on Nintendo Switch through Virtual Console or whatever it means.
I am so looking forward to Virtual Console on Switch. I need it.
Mm-hmm. It has a ton of potential for sure, and I'm really anxious on that kind of announcement at something like E3, because Zero Mission would be a great one to play. I appreciate the recommendation, but I don't know if I could go back and fire up the Wii U just for that. But playing it on Switch sounds sublime.
Right. I actually just hooked up my Wii U again to play Metroid Prime Trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
But my TV now is HD, and a different TV than the HD TV I was usually using was the Wii U, so I forgot that when you put it in Wii mode, it gets a little laggy on this television.
Oh, yeah.
So now I've been playing through Metroid Prime with the gamepad sitting right in front of me and me just hunched over a table.
Yeah.
It works surprisingly well. It's a very low latency screen.
Good. You just got to be careful with your back not to be hunched over all that. Yeah.
that puts a cap on me. One thing I was thinking of Metroid though is that if they make another one, I don't know if I'd want it to be like a $50 game, because one of the complaints I remember people had about Other M was that it was short. That game's it takes about 8 hours to play through it the first time, I'd say.
Yeah. I think to 100% it was maybe, gosh, I want to say 12, 13, something like that. In hindsight, yeah, it could have been longer. But that's an interesting point. I mean, yeah, would people have a problem with a Metroid game, the next Metroid release, being a little more of a budget title? Yeah, I think they'd be more just grateful that a new one exists. Let it go with those expectations, because the one thing that Nintendo always says is that, well, Metroid doesn't really sell well enough to, constantly make new ones. But if they kind of put a lower expectation one, not put so much money into development and all of those resources, and to have it be a more budget title, to have that audience kind of be a little more drawn to it, I'd be okay with that, especially if it's more like, the 2.5 or 2D, 2.5D style. Like that'd be really interesting. It's a good idea.
It doesn't even have to feel like budget for the sake of being cheap. It just, in my mind, Metroid games should take about 8 hours to beat on your first time, and you should be able to go faster than that if you want.
Yeah.
And get good. So my ideal Metroid game is something that would take about 8 hours to beat, and should have an appropriate cost for that, so people don't end up being disappointed. I would still be totally down for like another epic Prime game, although I'd miss pointer controls, because Metroid Prime Trilogy is one of the best uses of the Wii's controls, in my opinion.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, you remember those old trailers where it's he's dodging out of the way and shooting. Boop, boop, boop. I think it was still Revolution at the time for Nintendo. Yeah, so it's cool to see that kind of really come into play, just like what Skyward Sword was kind of the full realization of the Wii remote. Trilogy is awesome.
I was gonna say that too. Like Skyward Sword and Metroid Prime Trilogy are like the two games that I think just sort of validate the Wii remote as a true worthwhile gaming accessory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that, and I'd maybe throw in Wii Sports Resort in for a little more of the casual audience, because that worked out surprisingly well as well. I mean, yeah, Wii Sports for the kind of proof of concept, but when you had the Motion Plus and Sports Resort, like that added not only more games, but just better accuracy there. So yeah, I've been seeing different YouTube videos and all talking about Wii games, and it makes me a little nostalgic. But as far as going back to Metroid here, so I mean, you're going to go through the Prime games next, I'd imagine. I'm trying to remember the different.
Here's my order.
Canon, yeah, tell me the order here.
So I'm going in the canon order and assuming that all games are canon except for Metroid, which is canon, but Zero Mission is a more accurate retelling.
Fair, yeah.
So I started with Zero Mission. Now I'm on Prime. The next game would be Metroid Prime Hunters, I believe.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that game.
Yeah, I mean, that was really fun at the time. Have like a Metroid game with a online shooter component.
My brother played that one. I never did. But what was Silex was the one hunter that kind of stood out and people liked him?
Silex is the most iconic one.
Yeah,
that one.
Yeah. Oh man,
he's another like suited bounty hunter.
I remember people wanting him for Brawl. Oh man, good times.
It would have been nice, but I mean, I think Dark Samus would be kind of more relevant. Speaking of Dark Samus, next one on the list is Echoes, then Corruption. And I don't own this game, but I would consider buying it. But I think after Corruption would be Federation Force.
Oh.
And that's a spin-off.
Yeah. I wonder I wonder if that would be actually worth getting, or just be like, nah.
To me, that's like my evidence that Nintendo is not treating Metroid like a dead franchise. They're just very tone deaf.
I think, when Reggie says like, oh, we know, we hear the fans of Metroid, it's like, but then why do you even make that move? Like, yeah, that was perplexing, especially when it was shown as the Battle Ball or whatever it was during that the Nintendo World Championships. Oh man,
it's the Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts conundrum. Like, your fans want a new game. Why'd you make this game that's not it?
I think that's an eerily fitting parallel.
So after that would be when it gets back to the Japanese games, and the next one in canon would be Metroid 2 Return of Samus.
Oh yeah.
I'm not going to play AM2R yet, I'd probably play that afterwards. Mainly because Metroid 2, not counting Federation Force, is the one Metroid game I haven't actually beaten yet. I'd like to actually beat that one before I play AM2R.
Yeah, I think that would present some sort of new challenge on Game Boy there.
Yeah, I've played through a little bit of it. I just got sidetracked when I first played it and wound up not finishing it.
And
so I'll probably be able to beat it. It is an interesting game with an interesting atmosphere.
And Samus is huge.
Yeah, Samus is pretty big. I kind of feel like it would be better if they just went with the blocky sprites, like how Super Mario Land has really tiny sprites.
That probably would have worked out a lot better. Yeah, I agree.
But anyway, after that would be Super Metroid, which is my favorite. Not just my favorite Metroid game, but my favorite game of all time.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
Although I recognize that it's a little clunky, compared, especially when you have Zero Mission, which is so polished.
I know. I mean, it's still pretty darn awesome. Like, I really enjoyed my time with it for a first experience a couple of years ago. And that really shows its quality.
In my mind, the clunkiness of Super Metroid does not invalidate just how important that game was at its time. All the things that make Metroid Prime great, a lot of that would not be there without Super Metroid.
No, definitely. I can't say I was really tuned into games at the time, but it's one of those seminal Super Nintendo games. It's, it's up there when people say it's, one of the best games of the era, maybe all time. That's really important. And then Fusion and Other M, like, where do those fall after that?
Other M takes place like between Super and Fusion. I think it takes place directly after Super Metroid.
That sounds right, because there's the baby.
I know it definitely... It opens right after Super Metroid, that's for sure.
Yes,
because it's Samus being in the recovery room after the fight with Mother Brain.
Mm-hmm.
If they make another game like it, I probably wouldn't like Other M as much, but because it's the only game that really feels like a 3D classic Metroid, not to say that Prime isn't like an amazing example of converting a game from 2D to 3D, but since it's the only game that has like the speed of the old Metroid games in 3D, I really want that experience from something, and Other M is kind of the only place I can get that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
But yeah, I'll play through it and see how it's aged in my mind. And then the last one in canon is Metroid 4, Metroid Fusion.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's quite a list of games. So it's good that you're going through them. I mean, I think between just new games and things that I miss, like, I definitely want to go play Night of the Woods now that Anneke talked about it, and we had Jeremy's recommendation and heard such good things about that. I actually still have Nier Automata sitting from GameFly, but Persona 5 hit at just a really bad time for that. So a lot of good games to play for sure. And then I still have my gaming resolutions that we talked about on this show. So I wish I could go and just play through a franchise like that. That sounds like a really cool project, and I'm glad it's hitting you at the right time like that.
Yeah. Metroid Fusion ends in a spot that I feel is really rich for sequel potential, and I guess it's just been kind of like circumstance. They haven't done a Metroid 5 yet, but by the end of Metroid Fusion, Samus has kind of gone rogue against the Galactic Federation. Part of Metroid Fusion is that Samus is made part Metroid in order to be able to eat the X-Parasites, and I've always wondered if there might be like any other sort of latent abilities that might come out as a result of that. And I just think that might be an interesting game mechanic if they did something like that.
Yeah, that sounds like it's ripe for sequel potential. I hope Nintendo's listening, and I hope we get some news at E3 for sure. Well, Jesse, thank you for calling in. Really appreciate the time. People can find you here, talk to you on the rhymeswithasia.com/call Discord server for the PowerSwitch. Hope you have a great rest of the weekend. Keep on playing those Metroid games. Really, thank you for calling in. That's great. Great insight.
Thank you, and I will.
All right, thank you for calling in. When we come back, we'll talk about some things to think about with some of the headlines in this week's gaming news. You don't want to miss it. That's all when we come back here on the Power Switch. Welcome back to the Power Switch. This week's tempo control music is brought to you by Mario Kart 8. You can find a new video game music top 10 list from a specific game soundtrack every Tuesday over at youtube.com/rhymeswithasia. Now let's get into some things to think about regarding the video game industry news from the past week. We have a few headlines here. First of all, Eurogamer reporting that Nintendo will be manufacturing an SNES Classic for this holiday season, according to sources close to the company. Some things to think about here. First of all, this comes off of the news last week that NES Classic has been discontinued. We talked about last time that, maybe the timing would have worked out a little better if, they talked about Nintendo's Switch Virtual Console plans. First talk about how they're going to satisfy playing older games on the go anywhere, as opposed to making this, shortage just kind of manufactured hit just for the holiday season. I don't know if too many people are wanting to buy NES Classic now, but I've been seeing a lot of interesting demand for SNES Classic. Maybe it's because more people have some more attachment to that era of games, and there are some great Super Nintendo games. And we were talking about Super Metroid just there with Jesse, and that's just one of them. I mean, you've seen different articles of people saying, oh, these are the 30 games I want to see from Super Nintendo on an SNES Classic. Of course, this is still in rumor, report, nothing confirmed. But we were talking last week about, there is the interest there, and it would make sense for Nintendo to kind of make that extra holiday money. But you got to think, something to think about is they have to push Nintendo Switch first. I mean, these, classic sort of machines, and then, gosh, you have people already saying, well, an N64 Classic, I'd love to play this. And you got to think of the long-term business, not the flash in the pan holiday special, going to drop it like it's hot 5 months after. You can't be doing that. You got to think of the long-term business, how you're going to establish these relationships for games to be on your digital storefront, for people to play games wherever. That's the real draw, I think. So if we don't see anything at E3 for Virtual Console on Nintendo Switch, that may be rather telling about Nintendo's use of nostalgia, use of old IP, use of just these past systems games, and that would be troubling. So that is something to think about, of reports of an SNES Classic for this holiday. But what about Switch Virtual Console? Also, Activision confirms that the next Call of Duty game will indeed be World War II. Call of Duty WWII, World War II there. The official reveal will be Wednesday, April 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So, as of this recording, not yet. But it's kind of the dirty, not well-kept secret in the industry that Call of Duty was going to go back to World War II. I mean, we were seeing different retailer posters and things leak, and just the talk was that they're going to go back there, and it kind of makes sense. Call of Duty has been pushing the future tech, the future game. We're going into space, and we're pushing things so far, making up different sort of technology of first-person shooters, and then you see Battlefield go back to World War I with such success, and I think that was just the storytelling was really effective there. So something to think about is how people will respond to this going back to World War II. Infinite Warfare, it sold okay for most game standards, but Call of Duty is kind of on the decline there. I mean, if anything, Infinite Warfare sold for that Modern Warfare remastered sort of itch. People wanting to get back into that excellent first-person shooter. And it's really fascinating that, if you think about it, I mean, the whole talk was, Activision, I'm sure a few months down the line, they'll make that as a $20 separate release, and they haven't done that. I think that's rather remarkable. They're kind of sticking to their guns about that hasn't been done. But for people to say that, Call of Duty is going back to World War II, you're kind of seeing a mix there. Maybe some people have gotten really attached to those games, but I definitely know of some people, some industry insiders, and people are saying that, yep, I'm going to buy Call of Duty this year because they want it to go back to World War II. And when it hasn't really done that since, World at War with Treyarch, and that was 2008, I want to say. It's been a long time. So I think it's the appropriate time for that to go back. But something to think about is, will this, kind of reverse the fortunes, or does Call of Duty continue to be, a strong seller overall, but is it continue a slow decline, or will there be a boost of interest because of going back to World War II? And after all, in today's political climate, I think some people may be in the mood for, killing Nazis once again. So we'll see how that all plays out. And finally, Atlus has registered different domain names. And while I'm on this big Persona 5 itch and just thinking about Persona and the RPGs that have shaped me, it's interesting to see these different internet domains be registered as just kind of ideas for possible sequels, kind of laying the groundwork for different trademarks and things like that of where the company could go after Persona 5, because Persona 4 had tons of spin-offs. You had Arena, you had Arena Ultimax, you had Dancing All Night, you had Golden, which was kind of an enhanced version of Persona 4. So that's where that series really kind of took the big gaming mainstream there, and it'll be interesting to see with Persona 5 and its success. I mean, it's doing great with sales, to see over the years, will it do something similar? Is Arc System Works already having a hand at creating another fighting game, but with Persona 5 characters? Does it stay canon? Are we even going to get another dancing game? Well, different domain names suggest there's P5D, P5U, P5AG, P3D, and PQ2. So kind of gives some interesting ideas of just possibilities. Some things to think about is what could happen, what is feasible to happen, but it's not confirming anything for sure, but it lays the groundwork, gives Atlus some flexibility, some options. I mean, P5D could be another dancing game. P5U could possibly be that, fighting game sort of sequel. P5R is like, are we going to get in cars? Are we going to have Persona 5 Racing? Who knows? Some people are making jokes about, Featherman R, which is kind of like the Super Sentai sort of in-universe sort of game. That would be interesting. P5AG, maybe that's something like an expanded version of it. I don't know what AG would necessarily mean, but interesting to see P3 thrown in there. Like, is this going to be like an HD version of Persona 3, maybe Persona 3 Diamond, something like that? That would be really cool to get that game on like a PS4. I mean, that'd be fascinating. And Persona Q2, if that's a sequel to the 3DS games, but now we're adding a third group of characters to. People complain about the Flanderization of characters, to have the essence of their characters really broken down into just the simplest terms and just really just embellished for almost comedic effect. So really interesting to think of where the Persona series could go. I think people are still really digging through Persona 5 at the moment, as am I. But it'll be interesting to kind of see the afterglow of that game. Just like, a lot of the big games this year, it's really interesting to see where kind of people sit with the games sort of after it finishes, and where does it go next? I mean, we talked with Legend of Zelda, and how will that game kind of be treated over time, and where do we go with that? Where does that series go? It'll be the same with Persona. Just to keep these in mind, and maybe in the future we'll look back on this and say, that's where they kind of laid the groundwork for this possible Persona sequel. So just some things to think about on an overall slow gaming news week, but some pretty notable headlines with an SNES Classic report. We got the new Call of Duty reveal this week for World War II, and a whole bunch of little Persona rumors, just possibilities abound. And that'll do it for this episode of The Power Switch. We are hosted by RhymesWithAsia.com, and we're on YouTube and Twitch at RhymesWithAsia. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Power Switch, and you can email us any questions, concerns, comments, or opportunities at powerswitchpod@gmail.com. You can subscribe to The Power Switch on podcast services such as iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. And if you could be so kind as to leave a review, that would really help as well. Most importantly, to participate in future episodes, you should join our community on Discord by visiting rhymeswithasia.com/call. Now, it's a small but growing community, and in these early months of the show, it'll be easier than ever to have your voice heard on this podcast. If there was a YouTube video that I could recommend, Family Jewels, or Family Jewels 7X as he used to go by, really talented musician, guitar player, bass player, drums, puts these, kind of heavy metal rock arrangements together. I'm really on that Persona 5 kick, and he just did a cover. I mean, he does great covers, some top 10 lists of, different game music. So if you're a big video game music fan, go check him out. But he did a cover of Life Will Change from Persona 5, and that's the big hype song when you're kind of delivering the coup de grace in these certain palaces here. So really exciting to hear that kind of cover. Done a really, really great job. So check out Family Jewels and that song in particular, but overall his channel. So yeah, Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We're sticking to it. whether we get a couple people tuning in or even more. We also got to line up some more guests. Got to really get back to that. But it's been a weird week. Just really wanted to keep podcasting, keep talking about games, keep talking to you all, and I really appreciate it. So thank you for calling in. It's really, really a delight it's like talk amongst friends, but also give you the avenue in a way to talk about whatever is on your mind with games. And hopefully we'll get some big gaming news happening. It's kind of a slow week for that, but less than 2 months away from E3, a month and a half almost at this point, really, to be honest. I got to start developing some yes or no questions, because I did that in podcasts past, and that's a whole lot of fun. So got to start thinking about that and what are some of the possibilities that will happen. So that'll be a lot of fun. And until then, I got to finish Persona 5. I'm pretty close. A couple more play sessions and I'll have that in the bag, and we'll schedule a spoiler cast in the near future. So stay tuned to our Discord channel as that develops. Regardless whether it's live or on your own time, I look forward to you joining us for our next episode. With that, I'm Peter Spezia. Until next time, switch up, call in, game on.